Cincinnati Bengals here in 2022. Zach Taylor, your head coach. Brian Callahan, your offensive coordinator. Lou Anarumo is your defensive coordinator here for this squad that did take the L in the Super Bowl. Who did they bring in? This was one of the more active teams towards making a goal happen in the offseason. Offensive guard Alex Kappa, massive signing. Right tackle Lyle Collins, massive signing. Center Ted Karras, massive signing. Tight end Hayden Hurst comes in as well for this squad. And basically what you saw here, Stephen, with Cincinnati is they went and they looked and like, listen, we're not going to sign a lot of players, but we're going to sign the players we need, which was offensive line that was having Joe Burrow run for his life, take a bunch of unnecessary hits, take a bunch of sacks all season long, and they went out and retooled this offensive line to where, at least on paper, you are looking at one of the better offensive lines in all the NFL. You're talking about going from one of the worst, a bottom 5 offensive line, into a top 10 offensive line overnight. And you combine that with what we've seen from the progressions with Joe Burrow, what we've seen with these wide receivers that are absolutely phenomenal. And I think what we're looking at here, you throw in a little bit of Joe Mixon as well. This offense could be so incredibly fun to watch week to week.
Those 3 offensive linemen that they brought in, you mentioned, all ranked top 20 in grade at their position by PFF last year. What we are seeing with the Bengals, like the Chargers, is a team in a front office fully taking advantage of the cheat code that is the rookie quarterback contract. And for the Bengals, having elite wide receivers on rookie contracts as well, because we've seen those guys making $20+ million a year on the second contracts now. So this roster is scary, in my opinion, and I don't understand why they are the second choice to win this division, because I know what a lot of people in the market are going to say, that they had a miracle run, they lost in yards per play in those playoff games to get to the Super Bowl. I was arguing with you about this last year, that I thought the Bengals were a little bit fraudulent in those playoffs and winning games despite some not sticky stats, but full credit to them this offseason. They have only gotten better, and they have addressed their biggest weakness, as you mentioned the offensive line. So I think the market's seeing potentially some non-sticky stats from last year, but I think context really matters here, Matt, because Joe Burrow was unlocked on first downs last year. He went from 30th to 3rd in EPA per attempt, 26th to 13th in success rate, 33rd to 1st in completion percentage. But the problem was they had the 10th fewest yards on second down last year. So why wasn't it better? It was because they were 23rd in the NFL in calling passes on first down. I think they were conservative last year in the first half of the season and even bleeding into a little bit of the second half of the season, because Joe Burrow was coming off of that ACL and they knew they had an absolutely horrible offensive line. So I think that led to a more conservative game plan for the Bengals early in the season. But as the season went on and we saw them go on their late season run and then to the Super Bowl in the postseason, they were a heck of a lot more pass heavy, especially on early downs. So I think this is a complete roster. I think the defense in particular needs a lot of credit as well. Lou Anarumo, I think, I'm not sure yet, but learn the name because I think he's a future head coach. Per Sharp Football, from Week 11 through the Super Bowl, the Bengals held opponents to 3 points or less in the third quarter in 10 of those 12 weeks. 3 points or less coming out of the halftime locker room in the third quarter. It's not just Joe Burrow in this offense. It's not just the improved offensive line. It's the defense as well that brought back enough talent to be good again. So give me the Bengals at plus 200 or better to win this division. That's an easy bet for me, despite the fact that they play a tougher schedule this year. I'm just curious what you think of the offense, because I do think they're going to have to do it a little bit differently than the explosive plays they had last year.
Yeah, but I think the player personnel is there to do what they need to do, right? I mean, like when you have an offensive line where your quarterback's going to have more time to actually make things happen, you're not as reliant, right, on those type of plays. They're going to be able to run a little bit more balanced of an offense. They're going to be able to run an offense that has is able to do some underneath stuff, is able to just kind of move the chains in chunks as opposed to these gigantic splash plays. I mean, when you look, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, that's the best receiving core you're going to find in the NFL whenever you look across the board here. And now with this offensive line, as you mentioned, all of which were at least a 71 or higher by PFF grades this past season, it is going to be night and day for what you're getting from Joe Burrow from time to throw the football. And when you have time to throw the football, you're able to do a lot more things out there. And let's not even forget what they did in the draft as well on the defensive side of the ball. They go out and get Daxton Hill as safety in the first round. They come back with another safety in Cam Taylor-Britt in the second round and get a defensive tackle in Zachary Carter, who's likely to be part of the rotation. He's not going to start for them, but he's likely to be part of the rotation as well. And so you now are looking at some solid secondary guys to go along with Chidobe Awuzie as well, and Bell and Bates. And so you've got a really, really good, talented roster here up and down. You mentioned 7th toughest schedule, and that would be the only hang up when you try to look at this team. And if you want to pick things apart, I get it, right? It is a tough schedule. I understand that. But when you have a team as talented as this, I'm not as worried about that, Stephen. I know that sounds a little naive, but I mean, you look and we're looking at this because the reason the schedule is so tough is because Dallas is still projected to be really good. Cleveland is still projected to have a bunch of wins. They played Cleveland twice. You and I are of the mindset that maybe they won't have as many wins as we think. Tennessee is on this schedule. They're predicted with a decent amount of wins. That's why this schedule's coming in as high as it is. I'm down on Tennessee. I'm down on the Dallas. I'm down on the Patriots, who are on this schedule as well and kind of boost up this strength of schedule type thing. So for me, I understand why it's listed as tough a schedule as it is, but I don't think it's going to play out to be as tough a schedule as it looks like here preseason. And so I'm pretty bullish on this Bengals team again. I understand. Yeah, I know I'm a Joe Burrow stan in the whole 9 yards, and I get all that. And it's I do have an affinity for Jesus H. Burrow, but
he's earned it though. Jesus has earned it, man.
Right. But if you look at what they've got, I mean, it is a upper half defensive line. It is a top 10 offensive line. It is a top 10 secondary. It's the number 1 wide receiver group in the NFL. It is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I mean, we are getting every single thing that you would want from a team here. So I get it, Stephen. People want to say, it's recency bias, and the only reason you guys like the Bengals is because of that run from last year. No, actually, you just said you actually didn't like them last year. Like you were sitting there trying to pick apart every single thing about this team, and instead you sit and you look and you say, hey, look, they got exponentially better at their biggest weakness. And I think this team is a real contender. And I really do. I think this team is a real contender. Maybe we're sitting here by week 10 and saying, oh, wow, I can't believe I was saying that about Cincinnati. But as we sit here in the preseason, and I've dug into this team pretty deep, I think this is a true contender. I like them to win that division as well, that number that you just mentioned. I don't know if I can get there on the Super Bowl just because I think that the AFC is just going to be so tough to get out of. It's just such a murderer's row. But there is a 22-1 out there if you are looking to play them for the Super Bowl, which a team did make it to the Super Bowl last year and getting 22-1 the next year when we think they got better, is at least the case to be made for that squad. But hey, look, plus 210 at DraftKings right now, over 2-1 for them to win the AFC North, I think is the play to make here.
Just thinking about it right now off the top of my head, I think this, to me, is the third best team in the AFC. I can't put them ahead of the Chargers and the Bills. I have the Chargers number 1. You can go back to our AFC West podcast to hear why I love the Chargers, and I'm down a little bit on the Chiefs. But I have to put the Bengals ahead of the Chiefs now with the additional offseason moves that they made. And I actually see a lot of similarities with the Patrick Mahomes progression that we saw with him in that offense and the roster, and now what they've had to do with him on the second contract. But the Bengals have done the same thing that they did with the young Patrick Mahomes. They were very explosive. They had young, cheap, elite pass-catching talent in the offense. You mentioned the 3 wide receivers are the best group in the NFL. Here's the key quote, I think, from Joe Burrow. I think he told us exactly what's going to happen this year with this offense. He said, quote, "The offense has to not rely on the big plays as much. Teams are going to be playing, sorry about that. Teams are going to be playing too high and making us check the ball down. So we've got to be able to sustain drives and run the ball and take what the defense gives us all the way up and down the field and then take those opportunities when they present themselves," end quote. So the Chiefs saw a lot more too high in recent years, but they still rank number 2 in EPA, number 1 in success rate. Just that defense cut down their explosive plays last year to 19th. So I think the Bengals are potentially going to have to be more patient. But now you mentioned the offensive line. That's the key to this. If the defenses are going to play off more and cut away some of those explosive plays, now you have an improved offensive line that ranked 29th last year in yards before contact for their running backs. That's not going to be the case this year. So now it's a pick your poison situation. You either back off to prevent some of the explosive plays, and if you do that, you're going to have running backs who were 5th in yards after contact last year, getting more yards before contact with an improved offensive line. So I don't know how you're going to stop this offense. The only possible theory I can come up with is Zach Taylor, the head coach, not getting out of his own way. But even I have to give him credit last year. Mid-season, he shifted from a very conservative to a very aggressive offense. And I would like to see more in terms of scheme. The Bengals were bottom 10 last year in pre-snap motion and play action, so I'd like to see more of that. But I think last year was case and point that this talent is more than capable of overcoming any coaching deficiencies that might exist. So that's not enough for me to downgrade this team because of some opinion about Zach Taylor.
Joe Mixon's regular season, if you want to do rushing and receiving, is 1,350 yards. Rushing yards is sitting at about 1,050, 1,049 and a half out there. So that's where he's looking at. Rushing touchdowns sitting about 9.5 for Mixon. I think he could have a pretty massive year.